Since the vast majority of us get our produce from a shop somewhere close to where we live, we often take for granted what it actually took to create the food that we can't go without. In fact, if it wasn't for the booming of the agricultural industry, things would be a lot different, with convenience stores and venues of the like having to get by on being empty. But other than this obvious truth, what are some of the agricultural facts that will blow us away at the end of the day? Well, whether you're a fan of the process or just want to know some interesting things about food we consume, you've come to the right place, as we're about to explore some of the most insane agricultural facts out there. So strap yourselves in and get ready for a day on the farm, as things are about to get interesting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on, so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we post. Alright, starting off strong, number 1, the making of a burger. Over the past couple of years, there have been a few droughts in the world, causing the region suffering to have water restrictions imposed on their populations. A great example of this is Cape Town, South Africa, where just 2 years ago citizens were watched like hawks and given punishing fines if they were caught using more water than what they had been allocated by the government. Considering how the human race needs water to survive, the disappearance of this natural resource would definitely set us back quite a bit. It's colloquially referred to by many in the scientific community as brain food after all, as it's required to actually make the body and the brain work. What does this have to do with the making of a burger though? Well, water is also necessary to raise cattle, which are often slaughtered to give us the hamburgers we so desperately want. We say often, but reports estimate that around 1% of cows raised for beef actually live a full life, which makes sense considering how we see them as means to an end. And interestingly enough, after all the complicated math has been done, it takes around 660 gallons of water to make a single hamburger. That's around 2,500 liters of water for those of you who aren't from the United States. So if you've directed your life towards the saving of water and have turned your attention to taking of military showers or avoidance of almonds, look no further than swapping your meat hamburger for a vegetarian-friendly one. Every burger saved equals 660 gallons of water, which is probably more than anyone can save in a few months. It's just a pity that beef burgers are so damn delicious. Number 2, the industrialization of farming. There's a bit of a disconnect between the purchasing of goods from a shop and the thought of where the food actually came from. The majority of us think about the origins of food by looking at the happy pictures of cows and chickens grazing on a family farm, happily living their lives until the time comes for them to be eaten. This is often not the case when it comes to the produce we purchase. It's true that family farms do indeed exist, but almost none of them are designated suppliers. In fact, according to the Huffington Post, factory farms have been reported to raise 99.9% of chickens, 99% of turkeys, 95% of pigs, and 78% of cattle that are currently being sold across the United States. And since factory farms look a lot less welcoming than family farms we think of when we buy our food, it's clear that the packaging isn't telling the whole story. And it's a good thing too, as if we were forced to think of these animals being kept in cages so that they could be force-fed and slaughtered for our enjoyment, we would probably find ourselves buying other forms of food that don't require these terrible animal crimes. The unfortunate truth of the matter is that factory farms have become necessary due to the overpopulation of the earth by the human race. There are a lot of people out there who need to be fed, and if we relied on family farms to supply us with the meat that has led to the overall development of our brains, we would most certainly run out in no time. Reminding yourself about the abundance of factory farms and the terrible conditions that animals go through for us to be fed does make you appreciate food a lot more than before, so be sure to remember as often as you can, and give thanks to the little guy that's on your plate every once in a while. Number 3, the fishiest of facts. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that shrimp are nothing more than insects of the sea, and since the majority of the human race either hate or are petrified by insects, you'd expect a pretty big aversion to the concept of eating shrimp. Funnily enough though, according to The Guardian, Americans consume more than 1 billion pounds of shrimp annually, which is nearly half of Thailand's yearly production of the tasty treat. And while shrimp is definitely better when fresh, frozen and already peeled shrimp is a lot easier when it comes to nightly cooking. As such, this is the type of shrimp that people often purchase. But beneath the buying of this product is a bit of a horror story that might shock you out of enjoying your next shrimp cocktail. So if you love shrimp, you might want to skip ahead, as things are about to change forever. According to reports, the United States State Department has previously tied seafood processing through the use of slaves in 55 countries on 6 continents, including major suppliers to the United States. As it turns out, 90% 90% of people who are employed to peel shrimp at processing plants are women, with the majority of them being paid next to nothing and thus being designated as slaves by international standards. Unfortunately for these shrimp peelers, no other jobs are available for them, which places them in a difficult position between a rock and a hard place. Who knew that slavery was still rampant in the shrimp trade, right? And here we were thinking it was just a thing of the past. And also, not to further scare you, but if they're cheaping out like that, can you imagine the quality of the shrimp you're eating that come from those factories? It's not like they're paid to do their job well. Number 4, the presence of fake salmon. If there's one fish that is loved on a global scale, it's salmon, which is mostly because of its abundance in sushi that is now sold all over the world. Buyers of the immaculate fish product will also tell you that there is nothing quite like the taste of a good salmon. Also mentioning that this taste can vary based on where you end up buying fish from. And while this might actually seem like nothing more than pretentious hogwash at the end of the day, these people are actually 100% right, although not for the reason that they expected themselves to be. You see, as it turns out, a large portion of the salmon that is sold in shops is not actually salmon at all, so of course, it all tastes different. Surveyors have actually found that around 43% of the salmon sold in the United States is mislabeled and actually consists of the meat of another fish that has been dyed pink to make it appear like salmon should. This sounds like a fact straight out of a dystopian horror story where the world has run out of salmon, but the government refuses to allow citizens to know. And we don't know about you, but we'd much rather know what we are eating at the end of the day. How fisheries get away with this, we have no idea, other than to say not enough people care, and money often talks louder than words. So next time you sink your teeth into a nice piece of salmon, ask yourself, what is this even? Number 5, the production of chocolate milk. Although very few of us have visited a farm before, the vast majority of the population are aware of how the production of milk actually goes down. In the farming setting, cows are often stimulated to produce more milk and are then led over to milking stations where they are milked either by machines or hand depending on the overall size of the farm. Common sense dictates that regardless of the color of the cow, the milk produced will be identical. But according to a survey conducted by the Innovation Center for United States Dairy, approximately 70% of American adults believe that brown cows actually produce chocolate milk. And while this might not be the highest statistics in the world, it's definitely far too high when it comes to the belief that somehow brown cows produce the chocolatey goodness that we have come to love on a hot summer's day. This is also not only statistics involving cows in the American population that goes beyond common knowledge. According to a study conducted by the Department of Agriculture in the early 1990s, around 20% of adults were unaware that hamburgers were actually made from beef. In fact, the vast majority of those involved in the study reacted with disgust upon hearing the fact that this was the case. And yes, we know that this was a full 30 years ago, but this was also 30 years after we had landed on the moon for the first time. Makes you wonder how many people believe these crazy assertions in today's world. Number 6, what it takes to bring us honey. A farming practice that has already taken off in the last decades comes in the form of large-scale beekeeping, which became almost necessary after the population of honeybees were said to be depreciating slowly. And since the remainder of the bee population doesn't really concern itself with the storage of pollen to form the nectar we so love, farms decided to invest in operations to give these honeybees the ability to sustain themselves, giving us the byproduct that we so desperately wanted. But how much do we actually know about what it takes to make a jar full of honey? According to reports, it takes around one full hive of bees to produce around a pound of honey, which is just under 500 grams for those of you outside the US. That is more than 55,000 miles of flight required by these bees in the hive, which is an insane amount of work just to have it all snatched up by the farmers that have purchased them. It has also been said that the pollen required to produce the same amount of honey calls for the bees to visit around 2 million flowers. So think of this next time you guys use honey in your pantry and give a little thanks to the little guys that made it all possible. Thanks, bees. What do you think of these insane facts though? Let us know in the comments section down below. We'll meet you there.